The markets are reacting positively to data from the Labor Department. It shows a slightly slower year-over-year inflation rate than economists had feared. Overall, prices are up 5.4% compared to July of last year. But core inflation, which excludes volatile industries like food and energy, is up 4.3% since last July, a slight decrease from last month. Economists believe that second number is a better indicator of the economy's health. Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell has signaled inflation rates are not yet a concern. He says many of the price bumps are tied to consumer demand and the reopening of the economy. The Dow Jones Industrial Average shot up about 200 points after the report's release. CBS News reporter Sarah Ewall-Wice joins us now for more. Hi, Sarah. So this increase is a good sign for the economy. Why is that? And what is driving up prices at this time?
So for some time, we've seen prices going up in the past few months. And these prices were both goods that were impacted specifically by the pandemic, but we also did see some rising prices for other consumer goods and services. One thing we did know is that prices would rise after the pandemic struck last year and prices completely plunged. So we did see that. It was just a concern over the rate of increases over the past few months. But this report shows that some of that is easing. We are still seeing prices on the rise, but it isn't as dramatic as some of the previous recent months we've seen, both the impacted goods as well from the pandemic as well as other goods across the board. Some of the specifics that are driving these increases, one are energy prices. Those continue to rise across the country. We've seen that for the past few months. Another thing that is driving prices at this time, but is slowly dissipating from other rises we've seen in past months, are food prices. Mainly, we've been seeing increases in the price of meat, poultry, as well as eggs. This is something that has risen both at home food as well as when folks go out to restaurants. Those prices are going up. Two numbers to keep in mind here are that are pretty substantial year to year, have been ones that have been impacted driving the rising prices, are the price of vehicles. We do know that used cars and trucks, they had been rising dramatically. Last month, that was a less of an increase than we've seen before. But year over year, that price is still more than 41% up from 2020, July 2020. And another whopping number that stood out to me was the price of rental cars and trucks from year to year was 73% from July 2020. So still increases, but gradually leveling off, which is the good sign here. Something to keep an eye on moving forward are the price of housing has continued to rise, and I think that's something people will be keeping a close eye on in the foreseeable future.
And Sarah, so as you pointed out, since economists are saying that the pandemic and the reopening of the economy is playing a role in some of these prices, what does it mean for the prices of goods and services long term? Do economists expect, as the economy continues to open and supply chain issues cease to be such an issue, that prices might actually trickle down a little bit?
We've already seen some prices start to trickle down a little bit from when there was very high demand. One price we did see decline last month was the price of airfares, or after that had been going up substantially over the past few months as people finally were able to go on those vacations after a year in this pandemic. So those came down slightly in the past few weeks. Another thing that we've seen is prices of lodging. That has been something that had been steadily rising, but that also has decreased slightly from previous increases. So in terms of folks paying for hotels. So those are two things that are specific to recent months. Something to keep in mind is the Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell has said we don't expect prices to go down from where they are when he talks about prices being transitory and the increases being transitory, that is, but leveling off more so to that extent. And I did mention before what we have is so-called base effect. So prices coming up from pre-pandemic levels, kind of leveling off there after dropping so dramatically. So maybe not going down to what we saw last year, but obviously leveling off to what we've seen in the past, a little bit more so than we had been seeing in the recent months.
And Sarah, how is the Biden administration reacting to this report, and how does it impact the president's infrastructure and other spending initiatives?
Yes, well, the president spoke today and he welcomed this report. The White House has been monitoring these numbers closely. They've been closely tied to reaction to his spending, both the American Rescue Plan earlier this spring, as well as the infrastructure and the budget reconciliation packages. There has been some messaging in terms of inflation. Republicans have really been raising the alarms on inflation and the proposed spending by the Biden administration and Democrats. I don't expect that messaging to go away based on the numbers we saw come out today, but it does take a little bit of the fire out of that if they slowly start to level off some. Something to keep in mind is, as the White House monitors this very, very closely, some economists have told me that with this spending on infrastructure and on the budget reconciliation package, that specific package focusing on family care, child care, education, housing, that is something that no Republican is supporting at this time. We saw no Republican voted for that package overnight. So that is something we will continue to see in terms of the messaging about inflation, but economists have told me long term they don't expect these spending prices to have a direct correlation with inflation in terms of infrastructure and so-called family infrastructure.
Sarah Ewall-Wice, thank you so much.